So if you don't love Disney Star Wars, you're the problem. If you don't love Disney Star Wars, then you're anti George Lucas. That is, of course, according to this article that just released last night from Movieweb. This article is absolute trash, and it is exactly what it is. It is an attack on the fandom. This is Disney shill at its worst. Why Star Wars fans are upset with George Lucas again. Fans have been angry at George Lucas since the Ewoks, but now he has angered a loud minority. Here is why some are mad at the Star Wars creator again. We're going to get into this. I want to share with you this laughable premise that they are painting here. A lot of it is absolute fiction. But hey, they need an enemy, and these are the people that need somebody to attack, I suppose. And here's the thing: you're going to see this in the article. It's going to shift from why Star Wars fans are upset with George Lucas, and it's going to very subtly shift its way to this: fans always need a new boogeyman to hate. That's the word that they're going to start using throughout this article. So they go from we're upset with George, which there might be some truth to that. He's not perfect. He didn't walk on water, folks. But we hate him. No, we hate Disney Star Wars and what they've done to the franchise that George Lucas created. But oh my gosh, Richard Fink, the writer of this article at Movieweb, I like how they give us the summary. Here's the Cliff Notes version of the article. One, fans have always hated George Lucas's creative decisions despite his success with Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Okay, well, I mean, we could speak on that right away. Fans have not always hated George Lucas's creative decisions. In fact, I would say that the majority of original trilogy fans loved just about everything with the original trilogy. Some fans didn't like the Ewoks. That's true. Okay. I'm not one of those. Most kids in that era aren't one of those. But, that's no reason to hate George Lucas. They didn't like the Ewoks. So chill. What are you talking about? Now, success with Star Wars and Indiana Jones, no doubt about it. Star Wars, the original trilogy, is the gold standard. It's the greatest. There will never be anything else that surpasses it. There'll be things that get close. Lord of the Rings is close. Denis Villeneuve's Dune is close. There's some things that are close to it. Indiana Jones is close, but nothing's ever going to pass Star Wars. The next thing, despite fan backlash, the prequels and sequels both made a lot of money and reached new audiences. Well, yeah, the prequels reached a younger audience, and yeah, it didn't quite generate the type of reception the originals did. Yes, there are plenty of prequel trilogy fans. There are people who grew up with those that love those, just like I loved the original trilogy. But there's significantly fewer of those people. Significantly fewer of those people. Star Wars wasn't the cultural icon that it was in the 70s and 80s when Lucas came out with the prequels in 99. Fans left the theater bewildered at what they just watched when they watched The Phantom Menace. Jar Jar Binks, midichlorians. Why does Yoda look like that? Just so many things about it. The Trade Federation, all the politics. It was different. It was a totally different flavor. In fact, it did not feel like Star Wars for a time. Now there were some good things, no doubt about it. But the prequels did make money because it was Star Wars, and Star Wars was back in the theater, and people were excited about it. Same thing for The Force Awakens. How much money did The Rise of Skywalker make? How much money did Solo make? Oh, they didn't mention Solo. How unfortunate, because it didn't make money. Their last movie in the theater did not hardly make any profit. The Rise of Skywalker. The one before it lost money, and their shows are have dwindling audiences. People are leaving Star Wars, and it's not because they're angry at George Lucas. It's because they don't like what Disney has done. The third point, George Lucas's backing of Disney and Bob Iger shows that fans hate him for him is based on misconceptions and entitlement. Again, hate, that is such a strong word. I don't hate George Lucas for coming out and supporting Bob Iger and Disney. I just don't respect it. I get why he did it. He thinks that's the best financial option for him. He's not a Star Wars uh, or he's not a Star Wars fan. He doesn't love it like we love it. He's the creator. He sees things differently. He is part of Hollywood. He is part of that establishment. So I totally get it. Uh, I don't like it, but it doesn't make me hate George Lucas. I'll always appreciate Lucas for what he did with the original trilogy. The prequels were a miss for the most part. The sequels were awful. And what did George Lucas have to do with those? Nothing. So why are you even bringing the sequels into this argument, Movieweb? The article says George Lucas has upset fans again. The man who created Star Wars, one of the most successful franchises in history, and brought joy into the lives of millions of people all over the world, has been treated as both an artistic genius and the worst thing to ever happen to the franchise. No, that'd be Disney. Despite being the creator of Star Wars, the co-creator of Indiana Jones, and partial to the creation of many beloved properties fans love to this day, George Lucas has a history of being vilified, which reached its peak in the 2000s following the release of the Star Wars prequels and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yeah, so we can't look. Is it not totally legit to criticize? I mean, that's what critics do. Is it not okay that we don't like some of the things that he's done? But where's the hate? Not hating George Lucas, just don't like it. If it weren't for George Lucas and Filoni coming out with a great Clone Wars animated show, I still wouldn't like the prequels to today. They actually fixed it, retroactively when they came out with a great show in the Clone Wars. And I give Lucas all the praise for that. But if I look at the prequels as a whole, standalone, I don't like them. The article continues, yet fans always need a new boogeyman to hate after years of hating the prequels and treating them as the worst thing to ever happen to Star Wars. Well, that's okay if that's somebody's opinion. When the sequel trilogy arrived and introduced a new diverse cast of characters, suddenly sentiment shifted. The prequels became adored, while the sequel trilogy was not the target of all their hate and scorn and the label of not real Star Wars. A small but very vocal minority of the fandom latched onto those quotes that Lucas made about the Star Wars films as proof he hated them too and was on their side. George Lucas threw shade at Disney. He called them white slavers. He was not a fan of what they did to his story treatment. It's in Iger's book. Now, has he spoken at length about it? No, he hasn't. But how much praise have you heard? This article actually goes into hearsay. Rian Johnson said he really liked his movie, The Rise of Skywalker, or I'm sorry, The Last Jedi. Hearsay to back up their point. George Lucas has said way more against Star Wars under Disney than what he said for them. So they're definitely wrong there. And then they get into the whole Nelson Peltz Disney shareholder, proxy war, like the Death Star blowing up the planet Alderaan. Those voices screamed out in terror and were suddenly silenced when George Lucas decided to back Disney CEO Bob Iger in the recent proxy fight for control of the company led by Nelson Peltz. Peltz is a major donor to the Republican Party who criticizes woke media. Praise God. Thank you, Nelson. Keep doing it. Something many of the hardest critics of Star Wars have said about how Disney has handled the brand. Without question. Without question. I mean, look, they're endorsing everything, pushing everything. So that's fair criticism. They thought Lucas would want Iger out of Disney after he had ruined Star Wars, but instead, Lucas backed the man he sold the property to in the first place. Because Lucas has destroyed the narrative that's been created, some fans now claim to hate George Lucas again. Who? Where is your example? Show me one person that says they hate George Lucas because of what he did. Did I feel betrayed by Lucas when he did that? Yes, I did. But it also stands to reason. He's not quite the guy we want him to be. We've interviewed people that know George Lucas, that worked for George Lucas. And we've been told stories about how George Lucas treats people. I mean, you could go watch The documentary that came out on Spike TV, and listen to what his ex-wife had to say about him and how he treats her to this day. So, and some of you guys are going to be like, well, she cheated on him, blah, 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 blah. No, George Lucas will cast people aside and act like they never existed. He'll fire people on a whim. George Lucas surrounded himself with yes men when he actually had people who could push back and help him make a great original trilogy. He didn't do it himself. People like the guy that wrote this, they give George Lucas way more credit than he actually deserves. Am I grateful for Lucas and what he did? Yeah, but look at this image right here. Are you grateful for that? If you are, good for you, but the majority of fans aren't. And the writer of this article wants to tell us that that's a vocal minority. No, it's a majority. And that's exactly why Star Wars is in the state that it's in right now. Everyone knows George Lucas created Star Wars, and the franchise is a beloved part of pop culture, yet even as far back as 83 with the creation of the Ewoks, people didn't like the Ewoks. True. But were they hating George Lucas because of it? No. That's ridiculous. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the release of Star Wars: The Clone Wars movies. The hatred towards George Lucas as a creative vision can't be seen in South Park's episode The China Problem, or it can be seen, where the creators have George Lucas and Steven Spielberg sexually assault Indiana Jones. Yeah, South Park's hilarious. They make fun and poke fun of all sides. It is what it is. This arguably gross and appalling form of comedy using sexual assault language to discuss the work of media was all too prevalent at the time, as the 2001 documentary The People versus George Lucas. Look, the documentary is extreme, no doubt. There's some things that I don't like, and it's actually cringe to watch because of some of the things that they say. But what they're actually saying, critically against George Lucas and what he did with the prequels, I agree with. And most fans of the original trilogy and grew up with the original trilogy agree as well. But the writer of this doesn't like that, and he's using that documentary made by a few people to justify saying that fans hate George Lucas. If you hate Disney Star Wars, and even if you hate or don't like the prequels, you're not a George Lucas fan. You must hate George Lucas. That is ridiculous that we're that far. That he's stretching the truth, that he's creating this narrative. They quote George Lucas and say, see, he didn't say anything about throwing shade at Disney there. I mean, this guy is refracting and bending the truth to such an extreme measure. It is ridiculous. George Lucas's thoughts on the Disney Star Wars movies. Fans latched onto Lucas's comments about The Force Awakens as justification for their hatred of the Disney sequel films. In an interview with Charlie Rose, Lucas said they wanted to do a retro movie. I don't like that. Every movie, I worked very hard to make them different. I made them completely different planets, different spaceships to make it new. This, combined with Bob Iger revealing in his memoir that Lucas did not like that there was nothing new in the film, added fuel to the fire. It goes so much more deeper than that. Bob Iger said way more about that. George Lucas spoke extensively about how he was betrayed. They didn't use his story treatments. He gave them a treasure trove and they threw it away. And they weren't going to listen to him, and it wasn't his anymore, so he walked away. But this guy doesn't get into that at all. And he even goes on that common narrative that we hear all the time. The fans drove George Lucas into selling Disney. Come on, guys. George Lucas has been very open about why he sold it to Disney. He sold it to Disney because he's getting older and he's got a family. He's got relatively a new wife and a kid, and he wants to spend the rest of his life doing that. He was afraid he wasn't going to be able to survive another trilogy, that he was going to be too old to do it. I fully support him selling Disney or selling the franchise, but I don't support selling it. Well, actually, I do support selling it to Disney. I don't support what Disney has done to it. That's the problem. The problem is Disney. The problem is not George Lucas. I'm not angry and bitter at him for selling at all. If I could sell something for $4.3 billion that I've made in entertainment, I'd probably do it as well, especially if I've been the owner operator of it for 4 decades, which George Lucas was. So this is just an incredibly terrible take. This is Disney shilling at its most extreme. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm sick of this. Keep going the way that you're going, Disney, and you will have Star Wars dead. No one will ever be watching it anymore unless it's what George Lucas made. We are You Are Echo Base Network. Thanks for being here on this one as I'm ranting. Appreciate it. See you on the next one.